Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, coming at you with his trademark sing-talking style, it's Matt Freeman. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Scott. How you doing, Scott?
I'm so glad you did it. I was like, part of me was like, I'm just going to throw this at him without prepping him for it and see what he does, but you nailed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're so welcome. I'm so proud of you. Our series covering the Best Picture nominees for this year's Oscars continues this week with our second film of 9. This week we're going to be talking all about Emelia Perez. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Uh-huh.
Oh boy. Before we get into this week's movie, Matt, I did have just like a couple quick Oscars related announcements. The first one is, as I talked about at the very first episode of this series, we don't know who the 10 Best Picture nominees are yet. We are making a lot of supposition here so far with our list. We were supposed to know by the time people were hearing this list, because hearing this episode rather, because the original date was the 17th. The morning of the 17th is when they were going to announce all the Oscar nominations. Due to the fires in California, that originally got pushed back to the 19th, this Sunday. They have pushed it back again to next Thursday, so the 23rd of January will be when that announcement will happen. No real change in what we're doing. We're just going to proceed forward. It's just I thought going into the next week's episode I would know for sure, but most likely we're going to have to do 3 episodes of guessing. And I think I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty confident with these 2 films, and then the film we're going to be covering next week, a movie called Conclave. Pretty confident we've got it right so far, but that is the state of that. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, Matt, and maybe I can get your opinion on this a little bit. There's been a fair amount of calls amongst people to cancel the Oscars this year due to the ongoing devastation in Los Angeles. I've seen several people do. I think Stephen King, our guy, actually chimed in on this earlier today that he thinks that they should cancel the award ceremony, that it just doesn't feel like the right time for glitz and glamour and everything that the Oscars is part of. I'm curious, what do you think about all this?
Having not thought about it a single nanosecond before this, my feeling is like life is full of kind of bad shit happening all the time. Sometimes in massive, devastating tragedies, sometimes just individual trials that a single person struggles with. And deciding to cancel festivities in response to this strikes me as like missing the point of festivities. Like it's not like we wait until everything in the world is just perfect and great and then we're allowed to have a celebration. Like in some sense, every celebration is us shaking our fist against the dark, even though we might not necessarily perceive it as such. So like I'm not even like a huge fan of the Oscars, but like I just don't see why you would cancel the Oscars because of that. I mean, one could say that it appears to be in bad taste, sort of, but I'm just like, well, it always appears to be in bad taste. So just like I nothing has fundamentally changed, I guess that's my hot take on not canceling the Oscars. What do you think?
Yeah, I basically, like, not to disagree with our best friend Steve King, but like I just think this is probably something that the industry needs more than ever. It is of course a terrible, awful tragedy unfolding in California right now. I don't even think it's done still, right? Like we're not even past the point of, okay, let's start to rebuild. There are fires still raging there right now.
Yeah.
More bad could happen. But like, first of all, I think the awards season and the awards culture around film and television in LA, like, is a lot of people's jobs and like how they make a living. And so like to cancel the Academy Awards would put a extreme amount of financial burden on a lot of people that desperately need money. Some of which could be people that have lost homes or are helping friends and families who have lost homes and lost belongings. It just seems like the exact wrong thing to do. I think I saw actor or actress Jean Smart suggest that they should cancel the telecast, still have the awards, and then just donate all the money to kind of relief funds and to the first responders and things like that. And I think that's great in theory. The problem is the Oscars don't just like magically make money. They make money because they're televised. Like that's what makes money. They they are paid in advertisement revenue and things like that, and the networks pay the Academy Awards to put them like right. So like
Yeah.
that's where the money comes from. So if we
Right.
cancel the like I think the best thing they could possibly do is hold the ceremony, make it a point to make the tragedy in Los Angeles a story of the ceremony, draw attention to it, draw money to it, use the money from the telecast to fund these things. Like, yes, absolutely, that should be done. It's not something that we should like just pretend we didn't happen, but I just think it's the wrong thing to just cancel all this stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not doing this coming from the place of, oh my God, I love the Oscars and I need it. I need it. You can't take this away from me. I mean, I do enjoy the Oscars a lot. I'm not going to like lose sleep if the Oscars don't happen one year. But I just think it's the wrong move. I absolutely agree with you that I think in the worst times, we need things like this more than ever.
Yeah.
There was a lot of this, not to once again talk about 9/11 with you, as I feel like we do every other week, but like there was a lot of sentiment. I remember this after 9/11 of like, can we ever be funny again? Like, can like all these comedy shows and like the late night talk shows were all kind of just like unsure of when should we go back out on stage and like tell jokes and be normal. And like even back then my sentiment was like as soon as possible. Like if the whole point of devastation and destruction and bad things is to crush our spirit and destroy us, then we need to prove that we're not crushed or destroyed.
Yeah.
And I think LA holding this event and using this event as a catalyst to begin the rebuilding process is the absolute best thing they could do.
Yeah. I just simply agree. Although I will say I would not be surprised if they did end up canceling it, just because like the optics, not even for moral reasons per se, but just like the optics of having a big lavish party in the midst of a hellscape is potentially so bad that the blowback would in some sense not be worth it. And
I get that. I mean, there's certainly an idea of like walking up to someone on the red carpet and asking who made the dress that they're wearing seems silly in light of an entire neighborhood being burned to ash. But like as you said, like that's kind of just universally true at every moment of existence anywhere ever, right?
Right.
Like these things are always ridiculous no matter what.
Yes.
It's always silly.
I'm definitely not saying I think they should. It's like if you ask me to make a prediction right now, I'm sort of I think there's a not super low likelihood that they actually do cancel it, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think either way, we're going to carry on with this series we're doing, because whether or not these end up being the 10 best picture films or not, I think it's still some of the most well regarded films of last year that I think you and I owe ourselves to sit down and watch. Right.
Yep.
Speaking of which, let's get into our film this week. Matt, let's talk all about Emelia Perez. What is this movie all about?
Well, I'll tell you, Scott, because none of our listeners know, because none of them watched it. Emelia Perez follows 4 remarkable women in Mexico, each pursuing their own happiness. Cartel leader Emelia enlists Rita, an unappreciated lawyer, to help fake her death so she can finally live authentically as her true self.
4 women?
Are
they talking about Emilia's love interest? Possibly.
I think that's the only option that makes any sense to me.
Yeah.
This is a terrible summary, by the way.
Oh, it's awful. It's so awful. This movie was written and directed by Jacques Adair. I can't say French. I'm sorry. It stars Zoe Saldana, Carlos Sofia Gascon, and Selena Gomez. Matt, what did you think of Emelia Perez?
I don't know. It's very strange.
Yeah.
It's very weird. Okay, so like probably most people didn't watch this movie, so it's like a musical, but it's like not very good at being a musical.
I heard it
Um,
described as from someone. I think I saw this on Letterboxd or somewhere. It's a musical by a person who doesn't like musicals. Um,
yeah, it's sort of like angry, like angry at the idea of music.
mhm.
Um, I don't even think I can say that I like disliked it or it was super long. It was super long. I think I have a weird uh, uh fascination or whatever with stuff that's just strange and doesn't fit comfortably in any box.
Yeah.
And so like at least in that sense the movie held my attention because you never know what's going to happen. Eh,
Literally no idea what's going to happen from 1 minute to another. It does
Yeah.
like so there is a like I don't watch a lot of telenovelas, but I like know of the concept of like a Spanish soap opera or a Mexican soap opera,
Mhm.
as these kind of insanely melodramatic, twisty turny stories,
Uh-huh.
and it feels like that's a little bit of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
We're just like every turn, every corner, something in the movie happens that you're like, we're doing this now. Okay, this is like the ending of the film is like, what? Really?
Yeah. There was I think tell me if you had this experience because I don't know if this is common or maybe if this is even the intended experience, but like I had this profound sense of dread for the whole movie. And I'll explain like the source of it is that you've got this character. So you start out with Zoe Saldana
As
and you're
Rita, yeah,
and Rita, you're situated and you're sort of made aware, like, okay, this is going to be one of those movies that's about like the heinous violence of the cartels and corruption and unfairness and injustice. And so I'm already on the wavelength of like, okay, so we're gonna watch some dismemberments in this movie. That's gonna
mhm,
happen at some point. So I'm like primed for that. And then she gets kidnapped by the cartel leader, and from here, so then she struggles with purpose. Rita struggles with purpose and
yeah,
feeling like she's not making any kind of difference. And then she finds purpose in helping Emilia, live life as she was meant to live it
yeah.
as a trans woman.
Yeah, so let's because the summary did a very bad job of
Yeah.
actually saying this for some reason.
Yeah.
The story is about a leader of a Mexican cartel, um, is a trans woman that wants to transition to finish their transition to a woman, and like because they are the leader of a Mexican cartel, she can't just like do that, so she's got to do it in secret and then like flee her life and run off and live a separate life as
Yeah.
Emelia Perez, our titular character.
Exactly. So the dread I think came from like understanding like, okay, but like Emilia Perez, this character, lived her life as a complete monster up until this point and like
Yes.
killed tons of people and has taken the extreme steps of kidnapping Rita and you know s- sort of threatening her in that like making her an offer she can't refuse type way.
Well, and I think unstated like undercurrent of this is that she had hired someone else to help her with this, and that person had failed and is dead now.
Uh-huh.
Right? She several times talks about her predecessor and how her predecessor was too slow.
Yeah.
My assumption is just that person is dead now.
Yeah, probably because we never hear about them. And I mean, I think even even Rita inside the movie is like, you're just gonna kill me as soon as this is over, so that your secret is safe.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot. So all of this, I, I'll try to get to my point quickly. Okay, so all of this culminated in me feeling like this can't possibly end well.
Uh-huh.
But then it just takes forever in getting to the part where things actually go horribly to shit, which
Yeah.
they do inevitably. And but like the part sort of the whole middle like hour of the movie, you could say, is it's like it's trying to be this sensitive portrait of this trans woman coming into her own, but like overriding it all was this dark cloud of me just knowing like that can't be it. Like the cartel stuff is going to come back into the movie. This is
Yeah.
going to be this is going to be this is going to go horribly wrong at some point. And that was weird. That was like my overriding like impression while watching the movie, is just this like dread
Yeah.
and like almost inability to pay attention to what was happening, because I was like, okay, when is the other shoe going to drop?
Hmm. No, I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong for feeling that way, and I do think that was deliberate. Like, I do think this is part of the design of the movie, which makes it fascinating and confusing for me. I think from my perspective, I don't think this is a very good movie. Like,
Uh,
I did not like it. I didn't hate it, and I'm mostly like impressed with its avant-gardeness in like a I respect what you were going for, Jacques Godard. I don't know if you really pulled it off necessarily, but like I appreciate the attempt. Because I do think this movie is doing a lot of things, and I agree with you. Like, one of the most fascinating things in the movie for me is we have this character of Emelia who gets this second chance at life kind of thing. She's living as she always wanted to. She's pulled back into Mexico by missing her kids, and the thing that I love about her is her wife starts dating someone new. Her wife, who thinks she's dead, starts dating someone new, and then decides to marry him. And the second Emelia feels like her kids are going to be taken away from her, the cartel leader immediately surfaces again, right? Like,
yeah,
you have this moment where Emelia, like, and it's in song form, like, seems to realize the things she was doing as a leader of a cartel and how destructive and awful they were, and like commits herself along with Rita to this foundation they start to like help identify the bodies and like give closure to all these poor people that have lost loved ones thanks to the violence of the cartel. And you really feel like she's learned something and is growing and is becoming a better person. But then, like, the second she doesn't get what she wants, the
yeah,
cartel leader comes back and is
yeah,
like fully there in full force, and is just as dangerous and scary as she was when Rita first met her. And it's like, wow, that's
yeah.
like that's very powerful. And that's why I think you're absolutely right about this cloud of dread, that you're supposed to be feeling this way. I think ultimately, like, when I step back and be like, okay, but like, so what are we doing with that? Like, what are
Mhm.
we saying here? Like, because the end of this movie is Emelia Perez is almost literally deified. A statue is made of her, and she's like honored in the square for being this basically patron saint of the lost kind of here. But like, she was a monster.
Yeah,
Like yes, she had moments at the end of her life that helped people, but like helped the people that she hurt. And yet like all she will be remembered by now is being this wonderful saint of the town. Like, are we saying that like all the good people in the world actually have this dark underbelly to them? Like,
I
what are we what are we
I
doing?
I don't know. So what this reminds me of, and by the way, I'm on the same page with you as sort of not really feeling like the messaging is clear. So there's a couple of songs in the movie that basically have to do with the fakeness and corruption of the society, which,
Yeah.
you know, the movie's very very harsh on Mexican society and government and everything.
Yeah.
Uh, so like one of the songs, for example, is like Emilia is basically giving a speech at a big charity dinner, and while she's giving the speech, and you know what I kind of appreciate on some level as a avant-garde piece of filmmaking, you've got Zoe Saldana dancing around and singing this like angry song, castigating the people at the dinner,
Yeah.
and obviously this is like in her mind, and it's actually kind of cool because there's a lot of like the guests at the dinner are either like literally statues or like repeating motions very robotically. It was just a kind of
Hmm.
a cool tableau that they managed. Point is, though, drawing attention to this idea of like hypocrisy and pointing out, like, you know, you're actually, you know, a criminal, you're actually an embezzler, you know, you have ties to the cartels, and that's where your wealth comes from. And I don't know, just like a list of all these wealthy people and how all their wealth and power comes from illicit sources, and how they're actually bad people. And of course, like, the person giving the speech is in a sense the worst of them, because
Yeah.
Emily was literal murderer and you know, tyrant. And And that all seems to be part of the same collage for me. But then I'm just like, so what though?
Yeah, yeah.
Because part of me is like, well, at least they're at the charity dinner, which is and what I mean by that is like, well, they're trying to find some kind of redemption. Emilia is trying to find some kind of redemption.
Mm,
Maybe it's not possible. Maybe it's too far gone. Maybe it's not even really redemption, but just a story of redemption that they can tell themselves.
sure.
That's I think that's the closest thing to a core message I got, was kind of a twisted view of like, maybe redemption isn't even the right word, just more like a self narrative that allows you to sleep at night once you kind of realize how many people you've hurt.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, I definitely think the movie is as you said, like positioning itself as being critical of the hypocriticalness of everything. And I think Rita is a really interesting character in that, because like Rita is both a victim of the problem and a part of the problem at the same time, right? Like we meet Rita at the beginning of the movie. She's a lawyer, and she's a lawyer working for a defense attorney that is essentially like getting people off for murder.
Right.
Like she writes this impassioned plea, knowing that this man is guilty, but arguing that his spouse killed herself. And then she goes to work for Emelia, and it's like the same thing. It's like she's frustrated by the hypocrisy and corruption in government that allows people to get away with murder, and then goes to work for, like, as you said, like the El Capitan of murderers, and to help them, like like fakes their death, does all these things, separates their kids, like, like, just she's part of all this and knows all this. And so, like, is there anything more hypocritical than that she's, you know looking for purpose and looking for meaning, and she kind of stumbles upon it, but it's all as fake as everything else she's accusing everyone else of. So um I agree with you. I don't ultimately know, like, to what end, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, there is that there is a love story in this as well. Like, Emelia meets this woman and falls in love with her. And I don't, like, that's played very straight in the story, like just like a legitimate, like, love story between two characters. I was like, what are we supposed to do with that? Like, am I happy? Am I supposed to be happy for her in her, like, you know starting her life over, and, like, because isn't it true that the person that she falls in love with was a murdered man, probably murdered by her? Now, the woman she falls in love with wasn't happy with that man, so we justify it that way, right? He was a bad person, but I definitely still murdered him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know, and this is how I mean by, like, ultimately I don't think this movie works very well on me. So one thing I learned after watching for like 45 minutes and going, what the fuck am I watching, is that this is based on an operette, which is like a mini opera written by Jacques Adard as well. The opera was based on a book, but and knowing that this was an opera, the style of the movie starts to make a lot more sense to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
of course, the talk singingness of it, the songs not being like what you typical call like a musical songs, but seems much more just a function of telling the story, and the melodrama of it, like, all seem to make a lot more sense to me. But ultimately, I just don't think it works. I want to bring our friend Wicked back in the room,
Uh-huh.
real quickly, and I
Okay.
just want to sit Wicked down, and I want to tell Wicked that I'm very, very sorry that I called your songs bad, because I think every single song in Wicked is 10 times better than any of the music in this movie. And like, that's I think that's just like, there's, of course, everything's subjective, right? But I just think it's true that, like,
Mm-hmm.
the music in this is not good. Like, quick, close your eyes and think of a jam in this movie.
Yeah.
that you'd like find yourself humming while you're walking down the street. It doesn't exist. But
No.
like saying that, I don't think it wanted to be that either. Like I don't think it wanted the music to be like these like super memorable, catchy songs that you would find yourself singing about vaginoplasty.
Yeah.
Like that's not what it's trying to do.
Yeah, I think it's all just it's just a lot of style, and not no substance, but the substance to me doesn't clarify at any point.
Yeah.
Like that's actually kind of what's frustrating or maybe just interesting to me about the movie is I almost just said all style, no substance, and I pulled back from it because I don't think there's no substance. I just think that the substance is murky and tonally confused. Like we keep returning to this same idea, which I think is the crux for me of, I think another typical scene similar to the scene you mentioned a second ago is like you've got Emilia, she's talking to her wife who thinks that, of course, thinks Emilia is dead, doesn't realize she's talking to Emilia.
Yeah.
Does and it's a really interesting scene because it's almost like the way it's played, you could watch the whole thing totally believing, oh, Emilia is so happy for her wife having moved on and feels a huge amount of compassion for the situation that she was in during their marriage, and is just has really grown a lot as a person. Or you could watch the exact same scene and have the impression of like Emilia is fishing for information on any mistakes or indiscretions committed by her wife during their marriage so that she can order someone killed after this conversation is over. And I have no idea which of those readings is the accurate one.
Yeah. No, 100%. Um, because like the way Jesse is describing her marriage to, I forget what Emilia's character's name was before the transition. I don't, it doesn't matter. But the way she describes the marriage is basically like what she says is like, yeah, if he hadn't have died, he probably would have gotten bored with me and killed me later.
Uh-huh.
And like Emilia's reaction to that seems to be like, no, that's not accurate. Like I loved you, I loved the kids, like because I think she said, yeah, he would have gotten bored with me, killed me, he would have shipped the kids off to be someone else's problem. And like what we know about Emilia is like she came back into this, she put herself back into this world in this danger because she was missing her children. So it
Right.
seems like that part of it's not true. But also the other part of me is like, well, where did Jesse get that idea from? Like, are we supposed to believe that Emilia was so playing the part of being this male cartel leader that even the parts where she was being a cruel monster was also just acting? Like she was pretending to be a man when she's really a woman, but was she also pretending to be a monster? And I think the later part in the movie where we see her like slip back into that, to me says no.
Right.
So like I just find that really interesting that Jesse is absolutely convinced that this man she was married to was a monster.
Yeah.
Was truly just a monster and has no kind of qualms about that fact. But then on the other half of this coin is the end of the movie in which it's revealed that Emilia basically, as she's dying, reveals to Jesse, "Hey, I was that person," and then Jesse, in like this moment of realization, like that's my husband back there, and like causes the car to crash, which gets them all killed. And it's like, well, wait, didn't you? Do you love him? Like I'm
Uh-huh.
so like I don't know
Right.
I don't know what to think. I really don't. And maybe ultimately that's the point, right? Is we're supposed to be just kind of confounded by all this is a story of identity, a story of who people are, who they pretend to be, who they like, and how all that gets muddled up and messed up, and maybe there's no clear answer and there's never supposed to be. But holy shit,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, I mean, I actually really like that thought. I want to follow that thread for just a second because it is like everyone sort of wants a contradiction.
Mhm.
Like Rita is closer to being the protagonist and central character of the movie,
Yes.
and like I think you already basically said this. Like she wants to uh do something authentic and fight injustice but the route by which she does that is the most twisted and hypocritical possible, because she's working with a cartel leader to get money from a bunch of criminals to fund this, you know, uh, 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 truth and reconciliation thing that is basically I don't want to say fake, but it's largely just a thing that they're all doing together so that they can feel better about themselves. And
Yeah.
these are like, importantly, these are murders that already happened. All you're doing
Yeah.
is showing people where the bodies are. Like, this is
Mhm.
the weakest sense of justice imaginable.
Yeah.
And so I think there is this thread throughout the movie of like, it feels confusing because it is confusing. Like, by design, these characters want things that are kind of impossible due to who they are,
Mhm.
or due to the way the world is. Take your pick. Um,
Yeah. And I think not doing the movie any favors, I think, is some of the performances.
mhm,
I think Selena Gomez. I like Selena Gomez. I enjoy the show Only Murders in the Building, in which she is one of the three leads. Um, I think she's very bad in this movie. I think that this is a complex character that we've seen played before. Kind of the wife of the gangster is like
uh-huh.
a tried and true archetype that can be very fun and very illuminating. And I just think she plays her kind of so flat. Selena Gomez does not speak great Spanish, and the majority of this movie is in Spanish. And I told you this before we started recording, but essentially they rewrote the character to make her American and not Mexican because her Spanish was just so unbelievably bad that they could not have her be Mexican. Um, and
Uh,
it's just not a very good performance at all. On the other side, I think is Zoe Saldana, who I think like carries this movie a little bit. Like I think she's legitimately great. You mentioned the scene with her dancing on top of the tables. Zoe Saldana is a very talented dancer. She always has been, and that she gets to do that in this show or this movie rather. I think I don't love the songs in this, but I like her performance in the songs a lot. I think the nuance and complexity of her character and the hypocrisy and all these mixed up things you're talking about. I think she captures them very very well. And I think my favorite scene in the movie, which I haven't actually talked about yet, is when she's in London and Emelia Perez sits next to her.
uh-huh.
That entire sequence from the beginning of it to the moment that she realizes who she is, like I think that is an electric scene where I was on the edge of my seat because you just legitimately don't know what's going to happen. I thought that was great, and I thought
Yeah.
Zoe Saldana carried that. That's not to say that I think Carla Sofia Gascon, who plays Emilia, like did a bad job. I don't think she did. Um, I think she did fine with the work that she had to do. It was like it's a difficult role to give someone, um, but I think Zoe Saldana is just like far and away like the best one here.
Yeah, I agree. My impression toward the beginning of the movie was like, oh, okay, this is Zoe's run for the best actress
Yeah,
nom.
yeah, hmm
Because like she's got this intensity for the whole movie, really. Even the beginning, like
yeah,
just this. I mean, part of it's just that I'm used to seeing her as, a Marvel superhero,
yeah.
and not that she's bad as not Nebula, Gamora. Not,
Gamora,
not not not
yeah.
not that she's bad as Gamora by any means, but just like that's kind of a cartoon character that she's playing.
Well, we've
She's
got
green.
yeah, we've gotten to see her green, we've gotten to see her blue.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's just like so many of the things that she does, she's covered in makeup and or computer graphics, and like this is a chance for her. Like this is Zoe Saldana, and
yeah.
this is her, and I really think she takes that and shines. She's in a Taylor Sheridan show, my favorite television maker right now, called Lioness, and she's absolutely insane in the show. It's amazing. She plays like a CIA agent that like trains undercover women to go in and and she like the show is just Zoe Saldana like screaming at people at the top of her lungs, and she's so good at it and wonderful. So I knew this kind of performance was in her, and yeah, it was so cool to see it here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean she's great. It's kind of funny that like it's almost a recurring beat that it's like, oh, but I'm so old. I'm too old. I'm far too old to find a man. I'm just so old. And it was like she's 46. She still looks amazing.
She does, yeah.
She's a beautiful actress. I don't know. It's ridiculous, but also I think it's I mean, on some level, like it's a commentary about, you know, the double standard, because you would never have a male character where the idea was like, I'm too old, and the character is 46.
Yeah, that's our prime. We're coming up on it.
Yeah, that's damn right it is. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to figure out if there's any credence so we can put in that stupid summary that we just read, where it's about women pursuing their own happiness. I guess she was. It's interesting because like we see her go on dates and it's just not working for her at all, and then that thread just kind of goes nowhere. Like I guess I was just expecting that to have a direction to it, and it could have just been cut out of the movie and saved a good 10 minutes and nobody would have missed it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is why the movie's not that good. I think this is a movie stuffed with style and like really good ideas. Like I actually like just stepping back from it all, like the idea of like, okay, lawyer, you have to go help a cartel boss transition to a woman and escape the country. Like that's like a dramatically good idea. Like I think that is cool. And I liked it, and I was bought into it. But like the movie itself feels like it's trying to do all these different things, and it's trying to be so avant-garde and bring all these different ideas. And you're right. I think there is on some level, you know, if you look at the poster of this movie, it is not 4 women, like it says, but it's the 3 women like one on top of each other. Like this is the story of these 3 women trying to figure out life in this world. You know, this I don't want to say this world run by men, because that's not I don't, maybe I'm off base here, but I don't feel like it's about women pushing back against like the patriarchy or anything specifically. Like I think it's just women like trying to figure out what their purpose is,
Yeah.
And who they are. And I just don't think it's executed very well. Like I said, Zoe Saldana is really great, but like, okay, so who is Rita in like who is Rita? What is Rita's story?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it putters out. Like I feel like it's firmly established in the beginning of like, you know, she's very, very talented, very smart. Maybe you could say it's like under under patriarchy, the fact that like she's writing this argument, but she has to hand it off to her boss to be the one to present and sell it, and he can't even memorize the lines. So like she's underappreciated and underutilized, and her boss, the man, is getting all the credit, and she wants to break free from that. So you could argue that. So she does it, right, and she gets this opportunity. She leaps on this opportunity to work with a cartel leader. You know, she's 1 minute sing talking about the corruption in government, and then the other taking a whole heap load of money from a mass murderer, because that's the complicated nature of her character. But I feel like after she gets it in with Emilia again, I feel like she just kind of loses. I don't know, maybe I'm off base here. Like where does she end up, and what does that say about her ultimately?
I'm not super sure. I mean, I do think her character arc is that she wants something that authentic, or not, basically she's surrounded by corruption and hypocrisy. Like I agree with you, it's not really about the patriarchy, it's more about a world that is corrupt and two-faced and contradictory. And like you said, she starts out in a career that's that way, and then she arguably tries to break free of that, but just ends up mired in it even worse, because now she's acting as the fixer for a criminal.
Yeah.
And by the end, she has basically created an almost saint-like figure of, you know, the tragically deceased heroine Emelia, who everyone believes is the hero, and she's raising Emilia's children, I guess. And it's not any more authentic than any of that other stuff was, because it's all based on this, basically reputation laundering exercise that she was doing.
Yeah.
I don't know. The short answer, I don't think I don't think it's like, oh, you and I are just dense, we're just missing it. I think it's actually just very muddy, and I don't even know that question has an answer. Like, I don't think this is one
Mhm.
of those movies. Sometimes stories are just not written with the sensibility of, like, the characters have arcs. That's just not. I mean, I think Emilia has more of an arc, but I don't think I don't know that Rita has an arc.
Yeah, and I don't think Jesse has one at all.
Yeah.
I think Jesse's supposed to just be like the kind of airheaded, like kind of crazy wife that's gonna go off and get wasted and party, and like she certainly doesn't seem like she cares about her children at all.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. If anything, if Zoe has an arc, it's like negative, actually, because for me, I was just asking myself, like, okay, well, the definition of an arc essentially has to do with, is there a mode of change? And to me, actually, the only real concrete moment of change that felt like, oh, really, we're doing this, was when Emilia has been kidnapped, and her response is to call up the gang contacts and be like, yeah, bring over 8 or 9 guys. And she's like standing there with her arms crossed while these guys are assembling, rifles, and then they
Mhm.
hand her a gun. And it's like, that's a line that was crossed. She's no longer just the, legitimate face of the criminal enterprise. She's just one of the criminals now. She's one of the gang now.
Yeah.
And
No, I
that's
think
and
you could say that.
and that's almost the last thing that happens in the movie. She goes and tries to rescue Emilia, fails, movie ends.
Mhm.
So that's what it is, I think.
I wonder if you could say, is this a movie about how it's kind of impossible to start over or to truly live an authentic self,
Uh-huh.
like I'm being very careful here because obviously neither of us are transgender people. We don't have any experience in that uh living with that and what it is like to transition and go through all these things. And so that is obviously like the biggest clearest symbol in the movie is a woman getting to, you know finally, after their entire life, be the person that they felt that they were the entire time.
Mhm.
But ultimately Amelia cannot truly be that person, right? Like she tries to go off on her own and be that person. She finds herself kind of inevitably pulled back into her previous life, first just through, the love of her children. She misses her children, she wants to be around her children again. Then, the consequences of her actions as a cartel leader, like making up for that, or the guilt of that is pulling her back into that. Then, inevitably, like, conflict with her wife, and the movie ends with her kidnapped and killed.
Mhm.
um so like this idea that like you can't actually do that. Um and, and I think that ties with what you're saying about Rita, Zoe Saldana's character, because that too is like she wants to be this authentic self. She wants to be appreciated, and she also like hates the corruption of this place, and she can't have both, right? Like she can't. Ultimately, she's just part of a system that's corrupt at the end.
Mhm.
um I don't know, man. i'm,
Yeah.
I'm really pulling at stuff,
Yeah,
but
no, no.
I
I I think you're right. I do think it's about the like the that's kind of what I was trying to say, or it's adjacent to what I was trying to say, at least, about like the inherent contradiction in what these people want, these various characters, because
Mhm.
they like, the reason they can't escape from the thing they're trying to escape from is that it is that it's impossible. Like it's like by design impossible. It's uh like they think that they can outrun it by doing X, Y, and Z, and it just turns out not to be true because
Yeah.
they can't actually let go of the things about their past that ultimately are the things that doom them. Um, it's yeah, it's very. It's also too long. It's another problem
Yeah.
with the movie.
It just like, I mean, there were definitely moments where I was like on the edge of my seat, like ready to see what's going to happen next, and there were moments where I was just like, okay, like losing focus, having difficulty paying attention. Um,
Yeah,
the, it's just kind of a mess of a movie. Yeah, like it really is. Like there is a part of me that completely understands why this movie was incredibly loved at some of the places it was. Like it did very well internationally. I think it premiered at, where did it premiere? It premiered at I can't find it. One of the festivals, Cannes. It competed for the Palme d'Or, didn't win it, but won the jury prize and the Best Actress award for its female ensemble. So it did very well internationally, but there's a lot of people that really don't like this movie. Like this is a very polarizing movie, and I can totally understand that too. Like I think if you go to this movie expecting a musical, like go to like Wicked, like you're gonna come out of it like, what the fuck was that?
yeah,
Like Wicked, let me just be as clear as possible here. Wicked is a better musical than this by leagues, and it's not even close. Um, like I cannot underestimate how much better of like a musical movie Wicked is than this movie. But I am just kind of inherently fascinated by what this is and what it was trying to be, and the places that it gets there and the places that it doesn't quite get there.
yeah. I mean, I think part of it for me is the tone is such a dark. It's really such a dark tone. Like it's not even. It's interesting because it's not even like a fun, you know, drug cartels movie. You know, it like Scarface or what's the one with it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like it's not like a fun gangster movie. It's like Sicario, where it's just dark and sad, and there's no winning, and you know it's basically a feel bad musical is what it is. And I don't think I've ever seen a feel bad musical before. I don't watch a lot of musicals, I admit. Maybe there's a lot of them. I don't even mean like, oh, it's a tragedy. Like, you know, Rent is a tragedy. We talked about Rent last week too. Rent is a tragedy, but Rent doesn't feel bad. Rent doesn't, like, it's sad, but it's also like life affirming, and it's like about the bonds that these people are able to create despite the tragedy of their situation.
Yeah.
This is just like if this that's why I said like it's angry at the concept of music or whatever I said earlier, where it's like the music isn't made to liven things up and make it more exciting and fun. It's like it's I guess I have to give it props for creativity because it's almost using music to make it even more of a dour, depressing slog.
It's
Um,
it's opera.
yeah, that's I guess you're exactly right. That's what it is. It's opera. It's not a
Yeah.
musical. It's an
Yeah.
opera.
Mhm.
Not that it's not really an opera, but it's yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah,
I mean, but it's not like, I haven't seen too many operas, but like if 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 we're gonna say like the reason it's not a good musical is because it's an opera, well then my counter to that is, well, I don't think it's a particularly good opera either.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm just I so just for comparison, last year we watched Barbie first, which was a movie we liked but not didn't love, and our second movie of our series last year was Oppenheimer. Um, a
Uh
movie
huh.
that we both loved to death, and eventually, of course, went on to win Best Picture. So here we are with Wicked, a movie we didn't particularly love very much. And then our second movie is this, which I am so incredibly confused and mixed on. Like I was hoping by the end of this conversation I would have like a firmer grasp on how I feel about this movie, but I really, really don't. Um, there are parts of it that I love, and I'm just like kind of good for you, Jacques Adard. Like, good for you. Well done. I'm glad you made this movie. There are
Yeah.
parts where I'm like, this is awful, and I never want to watch it again. And I think both of those parts live simultaneously
Yeah.
in me.
I agree. It's funny. So I'll say we actually, I think we both said in this conversation, like there was stuff in this movie we really liked, but we didn't really talk about that stuff.
Hmm.
Interestingly, which is like normally you and I like to and try to focus on the stuff that we did like. For me, it's very hard to articulate, like because the stuff that I liked was more of a vibe,
Yeah, yeah,
more of a like, I don't know, the way that scene made me feel. That's it. I don't
yeah,
I don't know how to communicate that necessarily. Um,
yeah. I mean, I like I. For me, it's almost like the thing that I like about this movie is that it exists,
yeah,
but I don't like it. Like that's such a weird thing to say, but I think it's just true. I want filmmakers to get to make avant-garde, weird experimental films where they do things that maybe quite haven't been done before. They do things a little bit differently than we're used to. I was just not ready to see Zoe Saldana like rapping on tabletop while dancing around. That's just not a thing I was ever expecting to see. Like I, by the way, knew this was a musical coming in. Like that's essentially the only thing I knew about it. I knew it was a musical, and I knew one of the three leads was a trans woman because I saw her when Zoe won for Best Actress at the Golden Globes for this. Uh, said talked to Carlos Sofia Gascon and said you are and could only be the Emelia Perez. It's like, okay, so I knew that, but that's it. I didn't know anything about the music really. Didn't know it was operatic. I didn't know it had rapping in it. I just didn't expect any of those things. So I was just kind of blown away, both like by like this is absurd and ridiculous, and also by I I I think this is kind of weird and gorgeous in a way. And so, yeah, ultimately, like I can't sit down and tell you these are the good parts. Like I could tell you the sequence where I talked about where they met at the dinner table in London. I thought was enthralling and
yeah.
like just I think a lot of the camera work was really good there. I love when the second she clocks her, the lighting drops away. I actually like as much as I didn't like the music in this movie. I thought that the sing-songy like tension of the conversation between the two of them as Zoe's kind of assuming she's here to murder her. And Emelia Perez is like not saying no, but kind of saying no.
Uh-huh.
I liked all of that so much.
Yeah.
But
Th-
yeah, it's mixed in a bunch of other stuff.
There's certain stuff where again, like you say, it's like I appreciate that they went for it, even though I don't know if it worked. Like for example, there's a scene where it's like a split screen with like three panel split screen,
Hmm.
and you've got. I need to get better at remembering the characters' names. Okay, so you've got um the wife on the left panel, and then you
Jesse.
got Jesse on the left panel, Rita in the middle panel, Emelia on the right panel, and they're both on the phone. So what's happening? See what's funny is it's conveyed perfectly clearly what's happening in the movie, but I'm going to struggle to explain it verbally because it makes no actual logical sense. But basically, what you're seeing is both of the two women on either sides of the panel are yelling into the phone at Zoe Saldana at the same time, even though these are clearly two different phone calls. And she's turning her head back and forth to the opposite sides of the screen as if it's like, now I'm responding to you. Now I'm responding to you. Now I'm
Yeah.
responding to you without obviously the phone is still at her ear the whole time, and it's visually conveying the, and it's a song by the way, of course, and it's visually conveying the idea of she's passing messages back and forth between these two parties,
Yeah. Yeah.
while having to maintain this fiction and like manipulate everything that she's saying. And I was like, that's great. That's if you're gonna do if you're going to elevate and be avant-garde, that's a great, like, I've never seen that before.
Sure. Yeah.
Makes total sense. Like I immediately got what they were doing with it. I wasn't confused. I wasn't like, why is she talking? No, you get it. And that's the kind of thing that couldn't really exist in a normal movie at all. So I like that there were things like that that they try at various times that work to varying degrees of success. I like that stuff generally.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I agree with you. I agree. I think that that kind of stylistic stuff is really cool. Like, I think, um, it's like, I think it's a well directed movie in a lot of ways, which is weird to say, but
Yeah.
I did want to acknowledge at the end here. Obviously, neither of these are things. Not being part of the LGBTQ community and not being Mexican, we can't really speak on any of these things from a personal perspective. But I did just want to put out there that like there are many people in the trans community that have heavily panned this movie for its portrayal of a trans woman. I think one of the magazines said this film perpetuates an idea of transness so completely from the cis imagination that like this is how non-trans people think trans people are, which is really interesting. One person said this filmmaker was painting trans women as liars. I don't know if I agree with that part. It's like, people are people. There's bad people
Yeah.
in all spectrums, right? Now I think maybe you can make an argument that like if we have a very small window of opportunity to paint the trans existence, we're going to make it a person who is like objectively a monster.
Uh-huh.
Does not further the trans goals. I get that, but I don't know. I think that maybe it does. Like you want to experience characters of all types, right?
Mhm.
But to another point, Mexico does not like this movie very much. Matt, the people of Mexico not too happy with it.
Uh-huh. They
I
didn't
think
appreciate.
Jacques Godard basically said, "I don't know anything about Mexico, and I didn't do any research before making this movie."
It's a very unflattering portrayal of Mexico.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And I think it just perhaps you could argue it like lacks the nuance to understand what, because I mean, like, I think very broadly it's like drug cartels. It's like what do I, a French person, know about Mexico? Drugs.
Uh-huh.
And that's like drugs and corruption.
Yeah.
That's what I know about Mexico. And those are the only facets of Mexican life I'm going to paint here.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. That's all we get. We get like, because the movie is almost in this, elevated style. It's just like, yeah, the whole country is the whole country is uniformly a rundown slum where everyone is terrorized constantly
Yeah.
by drug cartels, and
Mhm.
and all of the systems are corrupt. And yeah, it's harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, none of the cast is Mexican. A movie that takes place in Mexico. Uh, Zoe Saldana is Cuban. Carlos Sofia Gascon is Spanish, and Selena Gomez is American. So I think what really pissed people off about this is when pushed on why you didn't hire any Mexican actors. The casting director said there's a lack of local talent is the reason for primarily non-Mexican cast. I
Uh-huh.
think you're going to piss off a country when you say
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Wow.
Like, there's plenty of working actors in Mexico that would disagree with that
Yeah.
assessment.
Wow, it's the worst possible answer. That's
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think a very mixed movie from many angles. But like I said, like I'm almost more interested in a movie that is divisive than a movie that is like clearly loved or clearly hated.
yeah.
I find this interesting. I didn't love it. I don't want it to win the Academy Award. I haven't seen all the films on this list, but I have a feeling I'm going to like some of them more than this.
Yeah. I um I don't want to. I don't know, man. These first two movies are definitely not as good as any of the 10 movies that we talked about last year. So
Yeah,
I
agree.
don't know what to make of that. I hope that's not like a pattern. I hope it's just like, oh yeah, so sometimes you roll snake eyes. But
Yeah.
pretty disappointed so far.
I agree. I've seen people compare, if this movie wins Best Picture, I've seen people compare it to the tragedy that was the film Green Book winning Best Picture,
Uh-huh.
and I just have to fundamentally disagree with that, because like while I don't think this is a great film, I think it's nuanced and interesting in a lot of ways that Green Book was not, where Green Book is like the very, very stereotypical story of how um, a racist is taught not to be a racist by a black man.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think this is just so much more complicated and interesting and different than that. So I think that's an unfair comparison. Like, you have these movies like Crash and like Green Book that are just kind of resoundingly panned, but end up winning Best Picture. And I just don't think it's fair to lump this movie in with them. As much as I would be disappointed if it uh, ultimately won.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I appreciate. It's funny. Maybe this sounds totally contradictory based on the conversation that we just had, but wouldn't that be appropriate given the subject matter to end up in a snarl of contradiction? Um, like
True.
I enjoy the ambiguity. Like I enjoy the like what I could see it this way, but I could also see it that way. I can see this character in two totally different ways, and that keeps me in a profoundly stressed out and anxious state for the entire runtime of the movie. Not going to
Yeah.
say I enjoyed that, but artistically, I think I appreciate it more than a movie that's just like, all right, here's a lecture on how you're supposed to think and feel about things according to our modern morality, which is the complaint about those other two movies you just mentioned.
Yeah. No, I agree. I completely agree. So I don't know. We will see. Amelia Perez is most likely going to be nominated. I think it's only like maybe bumping up there to be a favorite because of the Golden Globes win. It did win for best comedy or musical at the Golden Globes, but the Globes don't necessarily predict the Academy winner very often. So I don't know. We will see. I hope that we have some better movies on this list coming after this one. Is all I'll say.
Me too.
I think we're going to, because next week's film is a movie I've heard, I think is also mixed, but I've heard a lot better things about it. It's a movie called Conclave. Um,
Okay.
just to give you a brief summary of it, it is a drama about the selecting of a new pope.
Okay.
The
Fun.
pope has
Fun.
passed away, and the bishops and cardinals are all meeting to vote on a new pope, and it's filled with some interesting performances. It has Ray Fiennes in it. It has Stanley Tucci in it. It has John Lithgow in it. So it's a lot of good actors, and I'm pretty excited to check it out.
I am too. That sounds right up our alley.
Yeah, I'm going to really like it. So that'll be next week's film. And for I think after next week we will know for sure what the 10 nominees are, so we can make adjustments to our schedule. But I'm pretty confident these 3 movies are going to be in it.
Sounds good.
All right, Matt. Before we go for the week, it was sadly we learned the news just today that David Lynch has passed away. He was 78 years old. I think he had emphysema, Matt. He smoked like a pack of cigarettes every day for 50 years.
Yeah.
But I think I haven't seen this, but I know like he lived in LA, and I'm like, oh my God, was it the fires that like led to the complications that led to his death? That would be so awful. I don't know. That's pure conjecture on my part. So don't quote me on that. But it was a real shock. Like, I know he was 78 years old, so it shouldn't be that much of a shock, because he's getting up there in age. Like 78 years is a decent life,
Yeah.
lengthwise. But when I read it, I almost couldn't believe it. And
Yeah.
I just thought we could take a few minutes here, just like remember him, and I think we both really enjoy the works of David Lynch. So
Yeah. I mean, on a personal level, he always seemed like one of those trickster spirits who was on our he was in our world to teach us a lesson,
yeah,
and
yeah.
through his art, through his persona too, not just his art. Like I think he was just a really interesting creative force in the
Mhm.
world. Um and then obviously speaking about his art, uh we've covered a bunch of his movies on our shows over the years, and they've always been stuff that just stayed with me like nothing else.
Yeah.
uh
You say a bunch, but it's only been 2. I actually looked this up today. We've talked about Blue Velvet and Mulholland Drive, and those were both for our Blind Spot series. Those were two films that you picked.
Right.
So that's the only episodes on David Lynch we've ever done.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess and the reason I had him on the Blind Spots series is that I felt like I hadn't seen very much Lynch, although
Yeah.
I think I'd seen a couple, two or three things outside of those, but um yeah, I don't know, maybe now I'll take the opportunity to watch even more of his movies.
I think so. I mean, I think I've seen a fair amount of Lynch, but I haven't seen a lot of it. There's a 1999 film, The Straight Story, which our friend Jody is like kind of constantly recommending for us
Uh-huh.
to watch. I think she's tried to get it on our canon episodes on this show several times, and it's unfortunately never won the vote. But I feel like we should take the time to watch that movie. I thought about like just kind of tossing our plans out the window after the Oscar series and doing Deconstructing Lynch.
Uh-huh.
Looking at his list of movies, I don't know how that's going to be possible. Just because he a fairly busy guy.
Yeah.
Also, we would have to watch Twin Peaks, and I just don't know how we fit watching 3 seasons of a television show into that program. So I
Yeah.
don't think we're gonna do that, but I do think there will be like opportunities perhaps to like spend some time with David Lynch, which I think is always a good thing. I think he's an incredible director. Like I like loved his stance on just refusing to answer questions on what was going on in his films. You know, like not only speaking of avant-garde and weird and different that we were talking about with Emelia Perez, like that was his MO, and he just didn't want to explain it to anyone. And I
Yeah.
like as much as I wish I could have like sat him down and say, "Tell me what you think Mulholland Drive is about, David." I love that he refused to do that. Like
Yeah.
that's actually wonderful.
Yeah, and I think it was like it was as far as possible from being a sort of pretentiousness. It was
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
it was like that was the experience I wanted you to have. You had the
Mhm.
experience. There's nothing I can say that won't diminish that experience. Not
Yeah.
going to say anything. Therefore, like,
Mhm.
yeah, it's great.
No, I totally agree. Like non-pretentious is like a perfect way. Like I think you build like an image in your head of these of like very artsy, artistic, avant-garde filmmakers, and you just have this image in your head when you imagine them of what they're going to be like and how they're going to act. And I love that David Lynch was never that. Never.
Mhm.
Like he was a guy that had a YouTube channel that like half the time would just post a video every day about the weather that
Yeah,
day. Why? Because he wanted to. Because he just because he wanted to.
yeah,
Um, yeah. Like no one. There's never been anyone like him, and I don't think there ever will be. Just one of those truly unique artists in this industry, and it's pretty awful that he's gone. But we will have his whole hundreds of things that he's directed, from shorts to movies and everything in between. So, um, pretty great career.
yeah. And we'll miss him.
I kind of can't believe that like the last thing I saw him in was it was Steven Spielberg's film. Oh my gosh,
I'm not sure.
why can't I remember what the Fablemans? He like
Mm.
has a cameo at the very end of the Fablemans where he's playing John Ford. Like the Steven Spielberg surrogate in the Fablemans walks into an office to talk with John Ford. The chair spins around. John Ford's ready to give him a lecture on how to be a cameraman or sorry, director, and it's fucking David Lynch. I loved the surprise of it. I laughed out loud in my theater, and I was the only one in my theater that recognized him as David Lynch. So I was the only one laughing. But it was just a really great moment. And I legitimately did not know that's the last time I'm gonna see him.
Yeah,
That sucks. But on the other hand, it's like so David Lynch for that to be the last time I see David Lynch on the screen. It's great.
it is very Lynchian. You're right.
Yeah. Isn't it? I mean, like, how many people out there like Lynchian is the thing that everyone in this industry that loves and talks about movies just like immediately know what you're talking about when
Yeah,
you say that phrase. Like it's
yeah,
it's become nomenclature.
yeah. And how many directors can you say that about? Where they Furthermore, no one can really define Lynchian. It's just a you know it when you see it thing, which is even better, right?
Yeah,
because it's that to me is the pinnacle of artistic achievement, is when they have to call it Lynchian because there's no other way to describe it.
I love it. I love it. Rest in peace, David Lynch. Thank you for everything you've given us. We definitely will have to spend some time with Lynch, Matt, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, that is going to do it for us this week. If you have any opinions about Emelia Perez, if you actually watch this movie, I think, as Matt said in the very beginning, I have a snaking suspicion that very few of you actually watch this movie, which I would not blame you for at all. But if you did and want to talk about it, feel free to reach out to us at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on Twitter at doofmedia, and let us know about David Lynch. I think one of our listeners put a beautiful Lynch tribute on Reddit today that was fun to read. So.
Yeah. If you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to subscribe and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on any of the major podcasting platforms.
And hey, do you want to hear us talk about other movies? Do you want to hear us talk about spooky movies? Well, you're in luck, because Matt loves horror movies, and he's making me do a podcast all about Mike Flanagan and all his scary movies and TV shows.
Okay.
No, we just launched our brand new podcast, Flanagan's Wake, today, the 16th of January, as we're recording this episode. Our very first episode on Mike Flanagan's Absentia is out now. We're going to be spending the next 2 years talking all about Mike Flanagan and the books and short stories that his work is adapted from. Man, Matt, I am so excited about this show. It's going to be so much fun. So we ask you folks, if that sounds fun, if you like listening to us talk about movies and TV, which I think you do if you're listening to this, make sure you check out Flanagan's Way. You can find it anywhere podcasts can be found, or you can head on over to our YouTube channel where there will be a video version of the podcast. I'm pretty proud of how that video stuff turned out, Matt, for our first episode. So if you're at all interested in watching us talk into the camera and then reference clips and things like that, check out the YouTube video version of Flanagan's Wake.
Yeah, I do recommend that. The video is where it's at, and it's fun. We had fun doing it. We're having fun so far. We've recorded 2 episodes, and looking forward to the next 98 or so. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. We will be back next week with Conclave. Hopefully, Matt, the first one we really like.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.